Hello and welcome back, friends. I hope you are having a great day. Jason is here again with your regular dose of sorry what tales. Shout out to our BTB enthusiasts. Today's story is so unhinged it could only have been written for you. Ready? Strap yourselves in and let us begin. Things have been a bit busy at home and at work recently. I'd been working hard with machinery breakdowns, and I had finally convinced the boss to instigate a servicing plan, and not wait until something broke before it got fixed and serviced at the same time. I'd spent ages gathering all the data I wanted to present to him. I convinced him the way he was going about it was a false economy. I'd spent most of my evenings for several weeks assessing breakdown statistics and service plans. I did stop working on weekends to spend time with my wife Carolyn. She was busy at work as well. She was an admin assistant at a local college. They'd had a major upheaval. They had a report of requires improvement from the school regulators, and they were pulling out all the stops to find out where they needed to improve and get an improvement program started. So she had been busy as well and sometimes worked late at work, as well as at home in the evening. But she, like me, took the weekend off so we could be with each other, and our son Jason when he was home from university with his girlfriend. I looked at the weather forecast for the next weekend, and it was good. We were getting towards the end of a long, wet, windy, cold winter. We'd both been working hard, so I thought I'd surprise the love of my life. We have a static caravan on the south coast just outside Christchurch in a holiday park. It was winterized at the moment. It's a pain de-winterizing it, so I thought I'd take a day off work, the boss owed me one at least, and get it ready for the weekend, and then surprise Carolyn with a weekend away, just the two of us. It wouldn't take me long to de-winterize it and air out the bedding on my own. In fact, I had winterized it on my own the previous autumn. It was so much easier to do that sort of thing without ladies around. I had a chat with my boss and told him I was having Tuesday off and told him the reason why in case Carolyn phoned. I would take my laptop, and if needed I could cover stuff from down there. The internet coverage was great. As the site would be pretty empty, the speeds would be good. The site didn't close for winter, and a few hardy souls used it all year round. In fact, a couple of years ago the whole family, including Jason and his girlfriend, went down there for Christmas and New Year. It was great. I told Carolyn that I had an early meeting, that way I would leave early and miss most of the traffic. I also told her I might be home late because of the traffic. I managed to get to the van in plenty of time and went into my usual routine. I had left the caravan keys on the hook at home, so Carolyn wouldn't see they were missing and ask about them. That would ruin my surprise. I even picked up a bunch of roses with the intention of leaving them in the van, to make the place smell nice for when we came down at the weekend. It can smell a little stale after the winter. And I know she likes roses. There was a spare key hidden under the van, and if I needed it, there was a spare one in the side office. But I wanted to check on our spares that had been outside all winter, drop a bit of oil on it. It was in a small box with a magnet attached to the bottom of the van. I always put it in exactly the same place. In the early days coming back from the pub, I'd had to crawl around underneath the van. It was dark, dirty and smelly, and none of us were sober at the time. There was an awful lot of giggling. So, I always put it in its little box in exactly the same place, so I could just reach underneath the van and pull it out. Actually, we've never had to use it since that one event. That was when things started to get a little strange. I reached underneath the van, and it wasn't there. So not wishing to get smelly or dirty and being sober, I used the light on my phone to see where it was. It was all wrong, wrong place, wrong orientation. It was a good foot or so from where it should have been and was at a haphazard angle. I always put it, so it ran fore and aft along the van. It was easier to find that way. Well, that was the plan. Then it got stranger when I went into the van. I saw the fridge was closed. Now that's always left open, otherwise it goes smelly. I opened the fridge expecting to see masses of mold and a nasty smell. There was nothing. And that made me think, the van didn't smell quite as musty as it had in previous years. I wonder if somebody's been using it. My mind immediately rushed to Jason. But I'm sure he would have told us, and it's a long way from his university. He could have found somewhere much closer for a holiday. I was a bit more careful now. I turned on the taps, and there was a small spurt of water. That was strange as well, because after I turned the water supply off in the autumn, I had drained down the taps and left them open in case it froze and burst the pipes, and these had been shut. Now Jason would know to leave them open. Right, now I'm a bit concerned. Electricity meter was next. From previous years I know how much it had used over the winter. And it's not a lot. A quick check of the meter showed that it was a massive amount compared with previous years. I didn't have the exact numbers with me, so I'll have to double check when I get home. I took a picture of the meter with my phone and at the same time sent Jason a text asking if he'd used the van over the winter. I went round the van with a fine-tooth comb now, but nothing seemed to be out of place. But I was wary. I started to get things out. I got all the bedding out and hung it outside to air. It had been in sealed bags and was washed before we put it away. That done, I thought I'd make myself a coffee. It would have to be black as I didn't bring any milk with me, but that's not a problem. I can drink tea or coffee without milk. I prefer it with, but I can make do. So, I put the kettle on, I had a quick look inside, and there was a bit of water in the bottom. I would have expected that to have evaporated over the winter, even with the lid on, it normally does. Just another thing to add to the list. Then I started wiping stuff down and dusting, that sort of thing, waiting for the kettle to boil. I went to the coffee jar, it was probably out of date, but that doesn't matter. But it was nearly full, I can't be sure, but I think it was nearly empty when we left. I checked it and it was on date, it had an expiry date of 6 months away. We tend not to leave too much in the van over the winter. It was a bit of a pain that Christmas we came down, as we had to bring almost everything with us, even almost the kitchen sink. Just something else to add to the list. I thought about phoning Carolyn but decided not to, as somebody else had been in the van, she would feel it was tainted and wouldn't want to come here again. I had to find out and possibly keep it to myself. Let's hope it was Jason. Anyway, I'm sure she'd be busy, and I didn't want to spoil my surprise. I got the van sorted and headed home. I took the roses with me, there's no point in leaving them there. I could give them to Carolyn as a surprise. I popped into the site office on the way out and asked in a sort of innocent way if you could do that. If anybody had been seen around our van recently. The staff said they hadn't seen anybody, but they had noticed a fairly new red Mercedes estate, about once every couple of weeks or so, a few vans over from ours. It was parked next to a van that they knew was empty. They thought it was strange because people who drive that sort of car tend not to use holiday caravan parks, and it was red. As far as they were concerned, it must have been okay because in the winter it was swipe access to open the gate, so they must have had a pass. The office staff didn't have a great deal to do during the winter. On my drive home, stuck in traffic jams, my mind began to wander. Who was using the van, and who would know where the key was? There were only the three of us. Whilst in the traffic jam, Jason phoned me. It wasn't him. I told him I thought someone had been using the van, but to keep it to himself. I didn't want to worry his mother. She had enough on her plate at the moment with helping sort out the school report problem. I did tell him I was planning to go to the van this weekend as a surprise for her. So, if it wasn't Jason, then who was it? Being stuck in a traffic jam just outside Salisbury gives your mind time to wonder. And that's not good. Perhaps I read too many stories online. I started to put 2 and 2 together, but unfortunately, I came up with either 3 or 5. It wasn't me, it wasn't Jason, it could only have been Carolyn, but why? I started going through the things in my mind, the telltale signs of someone having an affair. She didn't dress differently, she didn't rush to the shower as soon as she got in, she did work late, but I always knew about it, and I tracked her phone. She was always where I thought she should be. Although her phone wasn't always switched on, and you don't get a signal in some parts of the college. Our sex life was the same, it had probably dropped off a bit because both of us were working hard, but we managed it at the weekend, even the bit of the other stuff she liked. Right, a plan came into my head. As I waited by the castle in yet another traffic jam, something popped into my head that I'd heard before, but I believed it to be good advice. Trust but verify, and sitting there I came up with a plan. In fact, several plans to do just that. I carried on waiting and pondering. Had I spent too much time on the internet? Was she having an affair? And why was she drive all the way down there? There were plenty of hotels they could stay in. But somebody was using it. It's horrible being given time to think, your mind goes down dark alleys, but again I didn't think she was. I'd seen no signs. Or was she good at hiding them? Or was I too trusting and too stupid to see, or a bit of both? Right, first thing to do, protect myself. The way the law stands, if you separate for any reason, it's a half and half split. I love that house we've been living in for the last 15 years or so, and we'd made it our own. I'd sweated blood over some of the work I'd done. And working long hours to pay for some of the stuff that I couldn't do. And then there was my pride and joy, a maroon MGB GTV8, almost completely restored. The savings account was quite healthy, mainly from the overtime that I got because machines kept on breaking down at work. If it turned out I was wrong, there would be no harm done. That was important. Setting up some cameras in the van was my next ploy. I'll pop down to the van later in the week and detour by the spy shop in Southampton and pick up some Wi-Fi cameras and maybe a tracking device as well, one that I could stick on her car or drop in her handbag. The plans were all coming together in my head. First test, she was worried that I might be home late, so I gave her a call on the home landline. She answered straight away, so at least she was at home. She told me she'd nothing prepared for dinner or she didn't know what time I'd be in. I told her I was 10 minutes away. She suggested I pick up something, fish and chips, a pizza, or even a Chinese. She also asked how the meeting went. I told her it was okay, but something had popped up and I'd talk about it later. I asked her how her day was. It was hectic, but if they pulled out all the stops, they could have a plan in a couple of weeks. But it might mean some more late nights. I told her that I was okay with that, as long as we had the weekends together. That was when she giggled and told me she looked forward to the weekends, and she had something planned for this weekend. I found it very hard to think that the love of my life on the other end of the phone was having an affair. I started to feel ashamed of myself and my thoughts. But I had to find out who was in the van, so the plan would go ahead in its entirety. Okay then, the second test. I picked up a pizza, a meat feast, my favorite, but not hers. I got home and everything was set up, even a bottle of wine, a bit strange for a Tuesday, but never mind. I opened the box, and she noticed it was a meat feast. I grabbed a couple of slices and deposited them on her plate. Sweetheart, you know I don't like the meatballs on this. From the initial lightness when I walked in there was a tone of grumpiness. Just pop them over here, and I'll swap you my pepperoni for them. That was what we'd done before. But she'd never been grumpy about it. Was I imagining it? Was I looking for stuff that wasn't there? Next test, she was carefully lifting a meatball from her pizza to mine. She was halfway across the table when I started on my story. I heard a rumor that someone at your place is having an affair. She dropped the meatball on the table. I picked it up and ate it anyway. I like meatballs. Where did you hear that? The meeting I was at, someone mentioned your college, and somebody named Julian was having an affair with one of the fellow members of staff and got caught. There's nobody at our place called Julian. They must have been mistaken. But because she dropped the meatball, it raised a niggling doubt in my mind. Did she know something? Was it somebody with a name like Julian? Who knows? But it's another thing to add to the list. But that was just the start of a list of comments to lead me to where I wanted to take the conversation. I asked her, do you have some sort of moral clause in your contract? You can't go around young impressionable people with married people having affairs. It doesn't set the right standard. Yes, I think we do. I shall have to check. Why the interest? It was just the mayhem that it all caused, ruined lives, nobody left with any money. They had to split everything half and half, and there wasn't enough to go around. It appears both are now living in shabby digs. It ruined 2 marriages and 4 lives, one of them even lost their job. Could have been both of them. If you don't have it, Julian, he must have got the college mixed up. But it's a bit worrying though, isn't it? The person who cheats on their wedding vows gets half of everything. Allegedly, in their case it wasn't much. I wasn't sure, but I think her face paled slightly, and she didn't talk much after that, just kept on eating the pizza with extra pepperoni and no meatballs. The hairs were standing up on the back of my neck, and I didn't like the feeling. We went to watch some rubbish on television. We normally discuss the stuff we see on there, but there wasn't much talking tonight. That was something else out of the ordinary. Was I reading too much into small events? I don't know. I'm just going to have to be careful, and not go down the investigating route so far that I can't recover it. The next step was going to be risky. But I had to do it just for my peace of mind. I did notice she kept on glancing at her mobile phone, almost as if she wanted to use it. It was just after 9 when her phone rang. She nearly jumped out of her skin. She looked at it and said to me, "It's my sister, I've got to get this." Of course she has, why would she need an excuse? With that, she took her phone and headed to the kitchen. That was different. I liked her sister. I liked most of her family. Her parents were a bit strange. She would normally answer the phone in front of me. We would just turn the sound down on the telly, and sometimes I would even interject. I was looking for things out of the ordinary. And now I was looking for them. I was seeing them. I turned the volume up on the television a tad, crept around the sofa and headed towards the kitchen. I was going to eavesdrop. It was something I was proud of. But I just had to trust but verify. I couldn't hear clearly because the bloody television was too loud, but it sounded like, "Sorry sweetie, but we're busy now. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Bye." That was a bit quick. I waited. Then I heard the words I'd been dreading. I heard her say, "I think he's guessed. Don't come near me tomorrow." There was a pause. "He's acting out of sorts. I can't lose him." More pause. "No promotion is worth my marriage." I'd heard enough. I went back to the sofa and carried on watching the telly. I had no bloody idea what was on. She came back in. I asked her how her sister was. She told me they were all fine. Young Emily had scraped her knee. That will be fairly standard. She was a bit of a tomboy. Then she cuddled up to me and hung on to me. She whispered in my ear, "I think it's time for bed, if you know what I mean." Oh, duck. I tried my best, but for me, it's hard to carry on whilst thinking somebody else may have been sharing this kitty, but I managed it. After we finished with her in my arms, I said, "That was a bit strange for midweek. What's come over you?" "I just love my man, and we haven't done much during the week recently." I went for a little dig. "It's not guilt then?" I was expecting a retort, but nothing came back. In the morning I left for work as normal, but I phoned the boss and told him that I was having another day off, but I will be contactable in case something important came up. Enough doubts have been raised in my mind. I went to the local second-hand shop and picked up a pre-used smartphone. A quick trip to the library to use their computer to open a Gmail and a Hotmail email account. Next stop was the local supermarket for a SIM-only mobile phone deal. All registered to my new email accounts. It didn't cost much, and if she was innocent, I could lose them all. If she was guilty, it was money well spent. I popped into the spice shop in Southampton on the way to the van, and picked up 2 Wi-Fi cameras and a tracker, one that I could pop it into her car or into a handbag. I set up the 2 cameras in the van. I connected them to the Wi-Fi. One overlooked the bedroom, and one overlooked the lounge and kitchen area. I'd managed to get them plugged into the mains, no need for batteries. They were motion sensitive and would send the video straight to my new phone when activated. As an extra precaution, I took down a jar of coffee. It was some rubbish that had been lying around my workshop at home. I emptied most of it away and got some of the sleeping tablets that we had left lying around after Carolyn's mum stayed for a week. I crushed them up and mixed them in with the coffee. I didn't know how many to use, so I kept going until I could just see the white in the coffee. I must make sure next time I come down to bring another jar with me. I sincerely hoped I was barking up the wrong tree. On my way back home, I drove past her college. And there was a recently registered red Mercedes estate in the car park. Next step, I spent some time coming up with some paperwork. I was pretty certain by now she was having an affair. But I still wanted to leave a way out in case I was wrong. If I was wrong, it would be something I would have to live with. We went to bed, and she got all amorous again. This was strange. I looked at her and said, "We haven't done it for months during the week, and now you want it twice in 2 nights. What's the matter? Your boyfriend not giving you enough during the week?" The look of shock on her face was amazing. "Are you accusing me of having an affair?" She came back at me. "I was just wondering about the change of attention I'm getting. Weekends only for months and now twice in 2 nights. I can hardly keep up." She repeated herself. "Are you accusing me of having an affair?" If the cap fits, word. That shut her up. That was bollocks, of course, but it had a result. It was a bit frosty after that, and we didn't do anything, not even cuddle. It was going to get worse for her. But I loved her, and I was planning a way out for her, if she would take it. But I was also planning to protect myself if she didn't. Thursday evening I got home and I had everything prepared. When I got in, Carolyn looked lovely. I think she was trying to work out between making up and not coming over too needy. It wasn't one of my favorite dinners, but one that was pretty close. There was a bottle of wine, and it was a pleasant meal. We chatted about mundane stuff, my projects, her college, the plans they had to get out of the mess they were in, and how things were getting on. Then to break the rhythm I did something out of the ordinary. She normally clears the plates and puts them in the dishwasher. But I did it this time. In a hurry, it all just went in the dishwasher, all in the wrong place, but I didn't care. She was a bit taken aback by that. I sat down at the table, leaned across and indicated she give me both of her hands. She did. "Sweetheart, we need to talk," I said. Her face fell. I looked her square in the eyes and said, "I love you with all my heart. I don't know how I would survive without you." I paused, then carried on. "But this Julian thing has got me worried. We have both worked so hard to make this a nice place to live, a place we brought our son up in, a place we both love, but if one of us clocks up we both lose it. So, I've come up with a plan. You won't like it, I don't like it. But it's the best I can do." She looked utterly confused. That was good. I got a sheet of paper and a pen out of my pocket. I turned it round and showed it to her. The heading across the top said, "Post-nuptial agreement." I could see she was getting angry. "Why?" she asked. "Look, in this country if I cheat on you, I still walk away with half of everything, and vice versa. If you cheat on me, you get half of everything including this house and the caravan and the cars. Anyway, you've not cheated, I've not cheated, so what's the problem?" She paused for quite a bit and then came back with, "I don't want to." "Why?" "It just doesn't seem fair." "Why? What have you got to hide?" "I've got nothing. I love you and I would never cheat on you. I've got nothing to risk. And if you've got nothing to hide, then what's your worry?" "I just don't want to." She paused, and it shows a lack of trust. I acted like I was thinking about that. I had already thought that would be one of her replies, and she was right. I had an answer for her. It was bollocks, but I had an answer. "But signing it shows you have faith in our marriage." Like I said, it was bollocks. I carried on. "What have you got to hide? What have you done? If you've not done anything or not trying to do anything, then why not? I'm happy I haven't cheated. I don't intend to cheat. I'll sign it." With that, I took up the pen and signed the paper. "The only reason I can see that you wouldn't sign this is that you have cheated on me or you're going to." I would never do that to you. She was in tears, there was guilt all over her face. I was pretty certain I had the right of it. I just need the confirmation. So why don't you sign? I asked. This is a big step, I need to think about it. This is for the long term you're talking about, forever. What if we just fall out? She was correct, it was a valid argument because I had already thought of that. I stood up. I'll let you think about it, and I'll think about what to do if we just fall out. But I'm going to the club for a beer, well, I think. I've already decided to pop to the rugby club. Thursday was always a busy night. The thing about British rugby clubs is that they are full of learned people, doctors, solicitors, lawyers, psychiatrists and the like. But the one I was looking for was a solicitor mate of mine. We had both played rugby together, but we were getting too slow and too old, and it hurt more. So now we play cricket together. I bought him a beer and asked him for a favor. I showed him my post-nuptial agreement. Without looking at me, he said, "Do you think Carolyn is having an affair?" I just smiled as he lifted his eyes off the paper and looked at me. "I need to confer with my colleagues," he said to me and walked away. In a rugby club, there are corners where discussions happen. There is a doctor's corner, and sometimes they get into a huddle. I believe they are discussing symptoms and the like, and the best way to sort out problems, no names, no pack drill, that sort of thing. The same with solicitors, psychiatrists and lawyers. Us plebs get the rest of the bar. Can't complain, it seems to work. My friend came back to me. The first thing he said to me was, and this surprised me, "You need to buy that crowd over there a beer or two. That way they've given you advice and you paid them for it, therefore, you are their customer. And if your marriage goes to rat sheet," with that he paused. I think he was on a bit of a roll where he wasn't normally talking to a friend. "Sorry mate, if it goes to rat sheet, she has lost all the best lawyers and solicitors in this town. All those that are left don't play rugby or cricket." He smiled at me. I went and paid for several rounds of beer. He took me to one side and we sat at a table. He started. "If everyone wrote their contracts like this, we'd all be out of business." I cocked an eyebrow at him. He said, "You lay things out simply, no nasty words like reasonably or considering. You say that if any of the two partners named is caught having sexual relations with another person not named above, this agreement will come into force. A sexual relationship is defined as placing any part of your body inside another person's body not named above. Allowing somebody, not named above, without objection to place something inside your body. Cunnilingus on a person not named above. Fellatio on a person not named above. Any contact with a sexual organ, and this includes, but not limited to, breads, vagina, anal passage and pen member from anybody not listed above is included as a sexual relationship." "Will that hold up in court?" I asked. Our resident divorce lawyer took a photograph of it as an example, so I think so. There are some tweaks you could do, but it's pretty solid as it stands. The financial side was quite generous, he said. The cheater gets 1/3 of all savings in their car. But the offended party that keeps the house, 2/3 of the savings in their car. We've got about 160 grand in savings, so the cheater wouldn't be destitute. That was when he dropped the bad news on me. This can't be retrospective. It can only be for the future. Otherwise, it would be seen as entrapment if she is having or has had an affair. Why? If she is having an affair, and you know or suspect about it, this would seem like you're taking advantage of the fact to gain something over her, the house and most of the savings in this case, that would be seen as entrapment. If, however, she is having an affair and stops on the presentation of this paperwork, well, then you'll have to find another reason for divorcing her and keeping the house. That wasn't my plan. Booger. But that would do even if she was having an affair, it would stop, and we'd go back to normal. I would sort him, whoever he was out later. Well, that was it. I thanked him and agreed to meet up next week sometime. I paid my dues and headed home. I love this woman that I've been living with for the last 20-odd years. Okay, there's been changes. Jason arriving, growing up and then leaving. We've been good together. I was prepared to give this woman another chance, possibly stupid I know, possibly wimpish, but I had loved this woman for 20+ years, so I'll give her one chance, but if she refuses, then the hounds of hell will come visiting. Well, actually I might just set next door's yappy Jack Russell Terrier onto her. I got home and she was sitting in front of the telly. I don't think she was watching it, I could see she'd been crying. She didn't look as pretty as she normally did, but I still loved her. I sat on the sofa next to her, and then I got her to turn around to look at me. I could see there were several things going around in her head, but none of them made their way to her mouth. So, I started. "Sweetheart, this Julian thing has worried me, and I have to do this. I've been to see my mates in the club with my postnuptial agreement. And they said I can't backdate it. If you or I have had an affair in the past, then that's it, it's in the past. Her face looked at me in a flash of anger. I ignored it and carried on. I know 100% I've not cheated on you, and whilst I believe you've not cheated on me, I cannot prove it. If you have, then it's in the past. So, when you sign this, and I know you will, it's only moving forward. What is behind us, is in the past. I was utterly gobsmacked by the outpouring of relief and love and tears from the woman in front of me. It was hugely over the top. The woman was a wreck. Which convinced me even more she had been cheating. Duck, now what do I do? I laid awake all night, as she had cheated, whilst I was now certain she had. I had no proof. What the duck do I do now? The woman I love, the mother of my son who I love. I did not sleep well. Whilst previously I was willing to forgive, now in the cold dark night, was I so sure. I awoke from my slumber. I did not feel rested. I smelled toast and coffee. I managed to make it downstairs and there was Carolyn bustling around. She seemed awfully happy. And there was a pot of tea in front of my chair with a lovely tea cozy on top keeping it warm. She got a coffee and sat down in front of me. She took my hands. She said to me, "Sweetheart, I'm sorry I didn't see it from your point of view. I thought about it last night and you're right. What this Julian did, and whoever he was with, it was wrong." With that she pulled out my postnuptial agreement and a pen, an ink pen, not a cheap biro like I'd used, and she signed it and more importantly dated it. At that point, I decided that what was in the past, was in the past. I would have to get over any worries and concerns that I had. There were still going to be niggling doubts, of course, and I'd have to keep an eye on that, and on her. I'd sort of forgotten about the weekend away in the van. There would always be next weekend, never mind. But then all the worries came back. Carolyn came in on Friday evening telling me she had to go to Bristol for a meeting on Monday, because one of the other admin assistants had dropped out. 95% of me wanted to believe her. 95% of me did believe her, but the 5% verify stuck its ugly head up. I pushed it to one side for the weekend, but planned. Carolyn was a happy bunny for most of the weekend. On Saturday I told her I was going to pop to the football club for a beer. She didn't bat an eyelid when I took the car. It's only a quarter of a mile away. I could have walked that far, and for Christ's sake I don't like football. I never go to the football club. I'm a cricket and rugby man. Her euphoria must have blighted her sight to the bleeding obvious. I popped in to see another mate of mine. I wanted to borrow his car on Monday. That was all sorted. We talked about her trip over the weekend. She's going to Bristol on the train first thing Monday morning and will be home Tuesday evening. They had a hotel booked for her, and she would let me know where it was, and I always had her mobile number if I needed to make contact. She was going to go by train, so I offered to drive her to the railway station on my way to work, but she told me there were several of them going, and the plan was to go to the college and get a minibus from there together. Couldn't quite see the logic myself. She would have to go past the railway station to get to the college, but I let it ride and added it to the list. It was a fantastic weekend. I think that she nearly shagged me to death, and I did my best. She had problems walking Sunday. But in the back of my mind, it was guilty sex. If my wife gets onto the train and goes to Bristol, I will be a happy man, and when she told me which hotel she was in, she may get a surprise visit that evening from the man who loves her. But if she didn't, a little yappy dog from next door would get released. Monday came around and I was definitely looking to verify. The thought was still popping into my head. I couldn't shake it. I managed to get the tracker into her handbag. Like most women, it was big enough to hide a dozen trackers in, but as long as the tracker and her mobile phone stayed in the same place and headed west, I was going to be a happy man. Well, mainly. I would have to get over my guilt for doubting her. I'm sure I would manage it. Another strange thing, there was a small carton of milk in the fridge next to the nearly full 2-liter one. I asked Carolyn about it. She told me she'd been asked to bring some. Why would you take milk to a hotel? Now I was certain something was going on. With the aid of a very sharp knife and a syringe, I replaced about a third of the milk with vodka. She wouldn't have to drive anywhere, so there's no risk to her license or having an accident whilst drunk. My boss was a bit pissed at me when I took yet another day off. I sat with my phone and tracked both her phone and the tracker. They both got to her work, and then her phone went off, but the tracker stayed on, and it started moving south towards the coast, not west towards Bristol. Now my plans swung into action. I gave my mate a call and arranged to pick up his car. I wanted to leave mine at home, along with my phone. I didn't want my car to be seen anywhere but here. If anyone checked my phone, it was in our house. I set my computer up in another device I'd made over the keyboard. It would strike random keys every couple of seconds, and I was logged on to the internet, and it would stay logged on all the time somebody was using it. I checked the cameras in the van. There was nothing there, nothing was moving, but they were working. I phoned the college, and I asked them for the hotel my wife was staying in. I got the answer I didn't want. They told me she had a day's leave. That was it for me. Better call next door and see if the Jack Russell is available tomorrow night. Action time. On the way out of the house, I went through the garage and picked up a tube of super glue and some gloves. I got into my mate's car and drove past the college. There was no red Mercedes estate. Was there still a chance? I drove to the local sex shop to pick up some anal lube, a couple of small butt plugs and a pair of handcuffs. Walking out, I saw something else that took my fancy. I paid cash, and I tried not to leave a trail. I got to the holiday park. I didn't want to swipe into the holiday park, so I parked my mate's car in a nearby street and walked in. And yes, there was a red Mercedes estate. It wasn't parked outside our van. The phone had made several notification sounds on the drive down, and as the only notification I had set up was from the cameras, I guessed what it was. Now I logged on to the Wi-Fi, and I could see what was happening in the van, and my worst fears were realized. She was in there with him. They must have had a quick one. There were clothes everywhere. It was all being recorded on my phone. She got up and made some coffee. She moaned about how crap it was, but as I had removed all the tea, that's all there was. He told her to use more milk to help disguise the taste. They both got back into bed, and I heard her say, "This is the last one. I can't risk it. I would lose most of what we've worked for. You've been fun, and it's been exciting. I will miss the excitement, but I do love him. And I think he's starting to suspect something. Although I don't know how we've been so careful. And I have to worry about the postnuptial agreement. Oh, come on, he'll never know. He's just a spanner monkey. I had a chat with the school lawyer. The postnup won't stand up in court. Anyway, you missed the sex." That's funny. According to my friends in the rugby club, and one of them was a divorce lawyer, he said it would, and unfortunately, I was going to find out. "I will miss this though," he said. "It was a good idea to use the van. I might have to persuade the old bag about getting one, a posh one though. She keeps a tight rein on my funds." "But you've got that flash smirk." "That's her money. You don't think a college deputy principal could afford one of those, do you? But I do better than your spanner monkey." "Don't knock him. It doesn't become you. I've just told you I love him. He's a good man and you try and run him down. And the sex, you're okay. He's actually better. It's just the excitement that makes the difference. I never say anything about your wife and why you've got to chase young ladies." He ignored what she said, and he carried on. "Perhaps we can restart when he's not so suspicious. When I'm principal, I'll need a new secretary, and you know what that'll mean." I saw her smile at him. "Yes, I do. You'll want more of me." "I'll think about it." She paused. "No, this is the last time. I love him and can't lose him. You've been fun." She yawned. "It must be catching because he did as well. Do you know, I'm feeling quite tired. We've got time for another one, then a kip before we go out for something to eat. I've got to be ready for his phone call at about 7 o'clock. I didn't watch them. It was too painful, but I was still recording. The little I saw, it was obvious something was entering her kitty, and she wasn't objecting. They didn't seem to last long, and I didn't hear any sounds that made me think she was enjoying it. I'm sure I was better than that, or perhaps it was because they were tired. It didn't take long for them to fall asleep. I knocked sharply on the side of the van whilst watching the video. Nobody moved. Good. I went inside the van and found his trousers, car keys, his phone, her phone and her handbag. I got the carrier bag that I had brought from the sex shop and a bin liner. I put a pair of gloves on that I had with me. I was not going to leave fingerprints on what I was going to touch now, and I certainly wasn't going to touch him with my bare flesh. I couldn't decide whether to put the clock cage on first or the handcuffs around his bullocks and clock. I went for the clock cage and a small brass padlock. I just managed to get one of the handcuffs around his bullocks and the clock cage. I enjoyed every click of the ratchet of the handcuffs around his man parts. I got it as tight as I could. Then I got the super glue out and put a drop or 2 or 3 into the brass padlock on the clock cage and the keyhole of the handcuffs. The next part was a little tricky. Good job, I thought of bringing the lube. A butt plug went up each of their arses. They were quite small, uncomfortable I would imagine. That is what I was hoping for. But a great relief when they got them out after the super glue had dissolved. I possibly should have done the butt plug before the clock cage, handcuff skid. Then I smiled. Who cares? It's all there. I then handcuffed Carolyn's left wrist to the other end of the handcuffs. I then set about removing every piece of cloth from the van that I could find, towels, curtains. I even rolled up the rug in front of the fake fireplace and threw that outside. Everything they could use to cover themselves up with. Their clothes were already stacked by the front door. I even took all the sharp knives out of the drawers so they couldn't cut up the furniture. I then took photographs of them with their phones. I was planning to just use hers, but I managed to unlock his with his thumbprint. I then took the passcode off. The hardest bit was getting the sheet out that they were laid on. I had to cut it up. I even took the pillows and the toilet paper. I also grabbed the coffee jar and the cups they had been using. I left the milk. Right, next stage of the plan, I took his car and parked it next to the one I was using, and transferred the folding bicycle I had into it. I had all the clothing and clothes in a plastic bag in the back of his car. I had pondered long and hard what to do about his car. There were no nearby gravel pits I could drive it into. I didn't want to drive it into a river or the sea. Setting fire to it in the woods meant it would still be found. I wanted it to disappear completely. No, there was something I'd read in a story online. I drove the car to the side of town where all the ne'er-do-wells hang out. I left it there with the doors unlocked and the keys on the dashboard. If this lot were sensible, it would be off the street and sold with a change of number plates or stripped down for spares in short order. But probably it will just be driven and wrecked, never mind. I still had their phones with me, her handbag and his wallet. I took all the cash out of his wallet and her purse and put it in mine. There wasn't much, but it would pay for some of the sex toys that I'd bought. His credit cards I left on the seat of the car, just in case some enterprising ne'er-do-well could use them. I took her credit cards, broke them in half and dropped them down a nearby drain. His wallet and her handbag went into a rubbish bin. I got the folding bike out and headed towards the holiday park. I just got out of the area where I was feeling a little safer, and I got the slip of paper out that I had brought from home, and phoned the number from his phone. It struck me that I didn't even know his name, to us if he was just deputy principal. I could have looked at his credit cards. Hello, is it the South Coast Gazette? Yes, who's speaking please? An informant. We don't take information over the phone unless you can verify who you are. I'm afraid I can't do that. I work for our local MP, and I'm afraid he's doing something he really shouldn't. These Greens are so upright all the time, and they think that they are better than the rest of us. He's currently in a caravan with another man's wife. I think there's some kinkiness going on. Now, MPs playing around is not news. But kinkiness adds to the excitement, and being the local Green MP added more spice to it. I think they took the bait because they asked where this was happening, and I told them. I carried on heading back to the holiday park and found myself a nice quiet secluded corner, where I could see the van and watch what was happening inside, which wasn't a lot. I saw a car pull up just down the road from the van. It was a strange place to park. I occupied myself by sending small video clips from my phone to both of their phones. And then by sending pictures and videos to everybody in their contacts list from their phones, and even to the South Coast Gazette. That kept me busy for 20 minutes or so. Then it got too busy with their phones. They kept on ringing and texts kept on coming through, so I gave in and turned them off. I saw a slight movement on the camera. I think they were waking up. I quietly slid around until I was by the side of the van, and then I banged rapidly on it. The look on their faces when they woke up was amazing. There was lots of screaming from both of them, but his was slightly different. It may have had something to do with pain as she wrenched her wrist away. I could go on about how they ran, well hobbled around the van, but there was no running. They managed to get themselves together and then realized there was no clothing anywhere. He just shouted, she just cried. The noise made the man in the car perk up because he got out and headed towards the caravan. They must have seen him coming. He leaned out of the window and asked the man if he could help by calling the police, as they had a bit of a problem. That was when he saw the camera from the man in the car. Goody, I thought to myself, that must be the journalist. The journalist asked what the problem was. All he was told is that they'd had a bit of an incident, and he needed the police. Well, the journalist was quite nice. After he'd taken a few photographs, he phoned the police. It was a quiet seaside town with nothing happening in the early spring. They turned up quite quickly. The pictures from inside were quite enlightening. The police called the paramedics. I could still see a lot of goings on. Oddly enough, the policeman's keys didn't work in the handcuffs. That may have had something to do with the super glue. One of the policemen came in with a set of bull croppers, and the two lovers were separated. The bull croppers were used on the padlock on the clock cage. That was when they discovered that that was glued on as well. I must have spilled super glue on his clock as well. Oh dear, never mind. The paramedics could do nothing about the butt plugs up there or scissor his clock cage. I think they may need something to dissolve the super glue. I don't know if there is such a thing. They were both taken to the hospital. I imagine there's a lot going on there, so it was time I went home. I had one job to do before I got home. I got out my toolkit and removed the batteries from both of their phones. I was tempted to throw them away, but they might be useful later. It was dark when I got home, and the first thing I did was try to phone my wife from my normal phone, which had been at home all day, next to my computer. Oddly enough, it went straight to answer the phone. At least I had registered an outgoing call. I shifted the device from the computer. I had several pages of meaningless characters which I deleted, then went and filled out some online forms. I printed them, signed one and stuck them in an envelope. About 8:30 there was a knock at the front door. A young policeman was standing there. He asked me to confirm who I was. I did, and then he asked me where my wife was. I told him she was at a hotel in Bristol, and I just tried to phone her but didn't get an answer. He showed me a picture on his phone of the lady and said, "Is this your wife?" Well, yes, that looks like her, but she looks a bit rough. I'm afraid she's not in Bristol, sir. She's down at Christchurch police station. I believe she was in the caravan you have down there. I don't know why she'd be there. She should be in Bristol at a meeting or something. I'm afraid you'll have to ask her that, sir. Can you go and collect her? Where's her car? Why can't she come home? How does she get there? Can't she come back the same way? Again, I'm afraid, sir, you'll have to ask her that. And may I ask you where you have been all day? I've been here. You can check my computer log if you wish. I've been online all day working. He took a note of that and took my word for it. Okay, my mate's car might be a problem if they looked into it, but I was hoping they wouldn't. Anyway, innocent until proven guilty, they would have to prove I'd done anything. I'm certain if they could be bothered to look they would find something. But I'm sure they had too many hate crimes to investigate. I got in my car and drove to the Christchurch police station, walked in and said, "I've come to collect my wife." The constable asked if I had any clothes for her because, at the moment, she was only wearing one of those silver foil sheets and a blanket. I told them I hadn't. The fact that she needed clothes must have got lost. Perhaps the young policeman that came to my house hadn't mentioned it, or if he had, perhaps I didn't hear it. I told him I hadn't got any. I must have forgotten in the hurry to get here. Anyway, where are her clothes? I got a reply I was used to. "You'll have to ask her, sir." They went and collected her. She was a real mess. Her makeup was running. Her hair was all over the place. She looked awful. She ran towards me. She almost tried to put her hands out until she realized she was naked under the sheet. I held my hand up when she got within arm's length, and I gave her the envelope. I think she guessed what it was. She collapsed on the floor crying. I had to help her up and out to the car. One of the policemen came and gave me a hand opening doors and the like. The nice policeman helped me get her in the car. I told him we were going to put her in the back. As we were putting her in the car, I saw across the car park a lady I think I recognize, using a handbag to beat a man around the head. He was also wearing a silver blanket. The policeman helping me left us and rushed over and pulled her away. I headed towards home, and she cried all the way, for the whole 2 hours. But I wasn't going to her house. I didn't get on very well with her parents. We tolerated each other. They are very religious, and whilst I am not a religious man, I think that the 10 Commandments, the Magna Carta and Sikh belief in equality of everyone, and whilst trying not to make the mistakes that man keeps making in accordance with Sissour's teachings, are a good basic set of standards to live by. Although I must admit to having not always managed it, especially when younger and definitely in the past week or so. I wasn't sure how they were going to take me turning up with her in this state, after all the pictures and videos I'd sent them and everyone else. When the car eventually stopped, I went round and opened the door. I gave her my hand to help her get out. Then she realized we were at her mum and dad's, not our house. She looked aghast. She looked at me through the tears. "Please take me home." "No." "Please, why not?" "I gave you a choice." "What choice?" she said through the tears. "To cheat or not to cheat. You chose to cheat. I suspected you'd been having an affair. I had no proof, so I gave you a chance. If it was in the past we could have carried on, grown old together. But you decided to carry on cheating." They saw me pull up. Her mother came out, and the first thing she did was slap her daughter round the face. She then looked at me and said, "Is there any chance?" "None at all." Carolyn looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, please take me home." I looked at her and with a sad voice I said, "I gave you a choice, you ignored it." Her father was there. He started helping her towards the house. With that I turned and walked back round the car. Her mother followed me. She asked me again if there was any chance. I got my phone out and played her the clip where he asked to restart after I wasn't so suspicious, and she had said, "Yes, I do, you'll want more of me. I'll think about it." But cut it off before she said no. I got in the car and drove away. Epilogue. The post-nuptial agreement stuck. She got advice from a proper divorce lawyer, actually one from my rugby club. It was only advice. He told her that she had signed the post-nup, and then willingly went and broke the agreement. She didn't have a leg to stand on. She didn't try to contest it. I got the house, just over £100,000 in my MG. As you may have guessed, they both lost their jobs. They didn't have a moral clause, they didn't need one. The reason given was bringing the college into disrepute. I think the military used something like that. He got divorced. I think she took him to the cleaners. The rumor was that they had a prenuptial agreement as she was quite well off when they got married. He would never work in the educational system again. Nor I suspect, would she. I gave Carolyn the caravan. I wouldn't want to go in it again. I gather she got a small job down there, so I heard from Jason, who doesn't have much to do with her apart from the odd phone call. I did see her at Jason's wedding. She looked awful. I was in between girlfriends at the time and didn't take one with me. She came up to me and said, "I'm really sorry, can we have another go?" I gave you a choice, you chose to cheat. I turned around and walked away. And that's it for today's story, friends. If you enjoyed today's story, leave a like and comment before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any video. Goodbye for now and don't forget your super glue.